Hello and welcome. My name is Andy Crook and I'm your host for today's training topic called Money Mastery. My mission is to help garage owners become more successful in business. And how I do that is I deliver a training topic on one of the 5 pillars of business as I've seen it, most weeks right here in the Garage Owners Network. This week's topic is money mastery, how the financially literate are richer than those who do not understand money and the fiscal system. Having a millionaire mindset won't make you a fortune, but it will make you appreciate money. And money goes from those who value it least to those who value it most. As an example, we all remember the lottery winner, Michael Carroll, often referred to as the lotto lout or the king of the chavs by the tabloids. He won 9.7 million on the national lottery in 2002. Yet just 8 years later, in 2010, he declared himself bankrupt. This proves that although having a lot of money doesn't make you financially literate, having financial literacy will help you keep or make more money. And I find it a little bit weird that financial literacy isn't taught in school, it's not taught in college or even in university. So I've taken it upon myself to educate myself by doing a lot of research, reading a number of different books on the subject, and looking at basically how the money and the fiscal system works. The two things are different, and it's probably too big a subject for a training topic. But what this training topic will do is introduce you to the subject of financial literacy. And what it'll start to get you to question is, and to discover maybe, is your actual level of financial knowledge. And maybe a little bit about your attitudes and feelings about money and wealth. And it's those attitudes, feelings, and that knowledge that drive your financial behaviors. And it is financial behaviors that will have a significant impact on your financial well-being of yourself or any other individual for that matter. Learning more about money and the fiscal system in general can help reshape your attitudes and change financial behaviors. So that alone means being more financially literate can make you richer. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to explore 3 areas, and we're going to explore financial knowledge, and then we're going to look at financial attitudes, and we're going to sort of explore in a sort of roundabout way how those two things influence your financial behaviors. And as I've just said, it is your financial behaviors that have a significant impact on your financial well-being. So we'll start by talking about financial knowledge. And I'm going to ask you what sounds like an obvious question, but very few people can actually answer it. And this simple question is this: what is money? What is money? And it's difficult, isn't it? Hopefully that's got you thinking. What how could you give a precise definition of what money is? So let's say someone's landed from outer space, they've landed on Earth, and you're trying to explain what money is. What is the definition you would give them? Now, we all sort of understand what money is, but can we explain it? Can we explain it to ourselves? Could we explain it to someone else? We know kind of what it is, don't we? It's sort of replaced bartering. Sort of. But can we explain it any better than that? I've got 3 definitions written down, and I wonder if anyone has put it as succinctly as these 3 definitions. A medium of exchange, and to flesh that out a little bit, a universal medium of exchange or of value. So by universal, what we mean there is that anyone, anywhere in the world, understands what money is. Their currency, your currency, etc., etc. So universal meaning it can be used anywhere. Exchange of value. And that's pretty much what that definition says. Another definition that I quite like is a unit of account. So money is a unit of account. And another one is a store of value and worth. Now, one of the things I like to think of money as is money, the unit of account I like to think of money being is energy. Money is basically a unit of account of energy. Now, that might seem a little bit strange, but basically, often when we exchange goods and services, it's to save us time and, if you want, energy. We don't have to do that thing. So I like to think of that unit of account as energy. But it just helps me understand what money is and what it is I'm exchanging. And that helps, that possibly helps you with your definition. So if you didn't have in your own mind a definition, a precise definition of what money is, you've kind of fallen at the first hurdle of the financial literacy test. So here's the second one. And this is a good question because lots of people think they know the answer to this one. So it's probably a good one to get you going with. And this is simply this. Is the value of the pound linked to the UK gold reserves? Is the value of the pound linked to UK gold reserves? And the answer is no. Yet most people believe money is somehow linked to gold. And it used to be, it was called the gold standard. However, the UK left the gold standard in 1931. And yet most people, myself included until recently, thought the value of the pound was somehow linked to the UK gold reserve. Did you know the UK has the second largest gold reserve in the world? I didn't. I thought we sold it all. But there you go. It's one of these weird things. So the gold standard, which the US stayed in a bit longer, they left in 1971, was how we used to value currency. It used to be against gold. But now the pound is in no way linked to gold. We're kind of measured against the US dollar. That's how currency is sort of valued. But it's not valued against gold. Gold has an influence in it, but it's kind of historical. So the next question, and what we're doing here is explain. So I'm not expecting anyone to keep score here, but is your money knowledge right? Are you up to date with this stuff? Do you know the answer to these questions, or are you left thinking, I ought to find out a bit more? So the next one is money an asset? Is money an asset? And most people think it is, but however, money goes down in value, not up. An asset typically is one that appreciates. Now, you can have a depreciating asset, and that is what money is. It's a depreciating asset. However, you could have an appreciating asset like gold, like a house or property, land, intellectual property, whatever it is, that goes up in value. And that is what most people would consider an asset. Although you can have a depreciating asset, it's generally called a liability. Isn't it weird to think of money as a liability, a depreciating asset? But in all honesty, that's what it is. So that brings us neatly onto our next question, which is, what is inflation? What is inflation? And inflation is the term we use for the depreciation of money. Yeah? And it's often due to an increase in prices of everyday goods. That's generally how it's measured. The retail price index, you've probably all heard of it. And basically what inflation means is a pound today is worth more than a pound tomorrow. So your pound in your pocket today is worth more than that pound will be worth tomorrow. And do you know how inflation is created? And it's not quite as simple as I'm about to say, but in simplest terms, inflation is created by an increase of money in circulation. And whenever it needs money, the government simply prints more of it. And I'll give you the most recent example of when we printed a lot of money which was during COVID. In 2022, the government printed £8.44 billion worth of money. The result, the highest interest rates in 1990. And that brings us on to the next question. Can you beat inflation? Can you beat inflation? Well, you can. You can save, store, and invest above the rate of inflation. So the return on your money must be higher than the rate of inflation. Otherwise, your money is going down in value. It's becoming a liability instead of an asset. Now, another way of beating inflation, and it's incredibly complicated, and probably I haven't got enough time to go into on a training topic like this. But if you borrow and buy an appreciated asset, and the return on investment is greater than inflation, basically the money you borrowed today, you borrowed at one price, but the value of that borrowing is going down every day, as well as you paying interest on it. And it gets a bit complicated, but if you then buy an appreciating asset, you could end up in a net better position at the end of it, which is why it's not always a great idea to pay off your mortgage, contrary to the advice you probably always receive. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But if you're following what I'm saying, which is not easy because this is a complicated subject, borrowing can sometimes be a way of beating inflation. The higher the inflation, the better it becomes, sort of, as long as you stay solvent. Not as easy as it sounds. So the next question I've got, is money scarce? Is money scarce? Now, I hear people say this all the time. Well, there's not a lot of money about. Ooh, things are a bit tight, not a lot of money about. However, there's £95 billion in circulation right now. There is money everywhere. £95 billion in circulation. So that gives you some idea of how it's not a scarce commodity. So that's enough on, if you like, on the knowledge side of things. And whether you knew all of that stuff, you didn't know any of that stuff, you could only judge that for yourself. But if you didn't know that stuff, you probably require some topping up of your financial knowledge. And some of those questions are fairly fundamental into setting your financial attitude, which is what we'll talk about next. So it's a common saying, isn't it? The money is the root of all evil. And it's quoted from the Bible. It's a misquote of a longer quote from the Bible. But you can see why there is such a negative perception around money or wealth, because of basically centuries old attitudes towards it. But actually, money is an enabler or a multiplier or a lever. That's what money is. It allows you to be more or do more of whatever it is that you believe. So if you are intrinsically a great person, having more money will make you a greater person. If you are a bad person or evil, money will make you more evil because it allows you to do more of it, whatever that is. So if you believe in charity, and at the moment, you've got a modest amount of wealth, you probably give a modest amount of charity. If you're Bill Gates, he's given away billions through his charitable work and his mission to eradicate malaria. So you can see how it's an enabler. So there is another attitude with money, which is people think the money is made to be spent. And what this leads to is this feeling around money that somehow when they have it, they have to spend it. Money is made to be spent, and it's linked to gratification or instant gratification. Or, as I like to look at this sort of idea or attitude towards money, is people prefer short-term gratification over long-term reward. And that means they prioritize things like holidays, fashion, cars over investment. And if you have a shiny car on your drive, we'll get to that in a second, and you don't have a load of money in an ISA, you've probably got this instant gratification or short-term gratification attitude over long-term reward of money. And people say it to me all the time. I've been studying this for about a year now of having conversations with people, and they tell me they can't afford to save or they can't afford to invest. Well, here's a simple example, and one that we could probably all sort of relate to. And is that is if you have a Costa coffee on the way to work, on the way home from work, or sometime during the day, it costs you around about £4. Or I think I looked this up earlier, £4.40. If you have one of those 5 days a week, one a day of your working week, times by 48 for the working year, you're spending over £1,000 a year on coffee. On that coffee that you get on the way to work because you go to the Costa. If you also don't make a packed lunch or have leftovers for lunch the next day, and you're picking up lunch, costs you about twice that, about £8 something, that's another £2,000 a year that you are effectively rewarding yourself by being lazy or enjoying a cup of coffee because you haven't made your sandwiches, can't be bothered, whatever it is. Now, if you save that money, didn't do that behavior, changed that behavior, and went for long term reward, save that money, in 5 years, you'd have nearly £16,000, which could be a deposit on a house. You could put it into an ISA, you could invest it somewhere else. You get the idea. It's it's changing that attitude about that money that's in your pocket and what you do with it. So I came up with three questions to ask garage owners as indicators of whether or not you have a positive or a negative attitude towards money and wealth. And the first one was, do you always pay yourself first? And I know many business owners who pay themselves last, and I can understand why, but it's an indication of a negative attitude towards money. Do you struggle when it comes to adding your markup or margin, whichever way you calculate it, to parts when you're billing or invoicing customers? Do you always feel if it's a big expensive part, I can't add 33 or 50% to that, depending on how you're doing it, markup or margin? So if your margin on a big ticket item, do you reduce it because it's a big ticket item, or do you keep your margin the same? If you struggle with passing on a profit to your business through your customer, you probably have a negative attitude towards money. Or, and this is the one a lot of people do, and it's quite common, do you find yourself trimming invoices? What I mean by that is knocking a bit off here, knocking a bit off there to make the invoice look a bit more palatable, because that normally also indicates a slightly negative attitude towards money or wealth. So they're the three questions. So if you find yourself doing any of those things, not always paying yourself first, struggling with markup or margin on big ticket items, or trimming big invoices, then you probably have a slightly negative attitude towards money and wealth. And what those attitudes and knowledge, so the knowledge that we don't have and the attitudes that somehow we've inherited, what they result in is financial behaviors. And what I mean by financial behaviors are what we do around money when it becomes to making, managing, and maintaining money. And the sort of things that we find ourselves doing is, when I think about money management within business, the sort of questions I start to ask people are, do you employ the services of a bookkeeper? And just about everyone does. It's one of the first people we employ within our business. And what I'm asking you here is that abdication or delegation? Do you still know all of those numbers? The numbers you should know about your business. And there's been plenty of training topics on this in this series. But you probably, when it comes to money management, you probably employ the services of an accountant to satisfy your legal obligations. And your accountant is probably advising you on the most tax efficient ways to run your business, because that's what they tend to do, which is absolutely fine. But have you got the right accountant? That's a different question, isn't it? And then, do you employ the services of a financial advisor? Now, there's no right or wrong answer to the financial advisor or the accountant or the bookkeeper. As long as you are your own financial advisor, you're your own bookkeeper, and you take an interest in your own tax affairs, because it's ultimately you that's reliable. And it's about whether or not you're abdicating these responsibilities or delegating them. And you can only make up your own mind around that. But often, because people don't understand money and they have poor attitudes or negative attitudes towards money and wealth, when it comes to financial behaviours around managing money, what we tend to do is pass on and we abdicate the responsibility to somebody else, and we rely on their expertise and professionalism instead of taking personal responsibility for it, which is what we should be doing. So one of the next things that is often mismanaged, and it's a behavior, a negative behavior, if you like, around money, is do you keep your personal and business finances totally separate? And you think the obvious answer here is, well, yeah, of course. I mean, but is that the best policy? Is it the most tax efficient way to manage your money? Are there, or should you be doing something different? Probably a conversation for your bookkeeper stroke accountant. I'm not qualified to give financial advice, but should you be keeping it all completely separate? Something to think about. Another one when it comes to managing money is, do you have strict budgets or cost centers or cash allocated to specific projects? Or is all your money in your business in one big pot? It's the business's money. And therefore, you don't really have budgets. So you can overspend in one area, underspend in another area, whatever it is you're doing. Do you know how much money is going to come in, how much money is going to go out in any given time frame within the business? What we call budgeting in a wider sense. So that having budgets is vital for cash flow. So when we move on from the sort of the money management side of things, well, then we start thinking about, in terms of behaviors, savings. And do you have a regular saving habit? And how much should you have in savings? And these are not easy to answer questions. So how much should you have in a easy access, that is almost immediate access saving account for your personal life? And how much should you have in a very easy to access savings account for your business? Now, if you don't have any savings, this is something that you should be thinking about having. Now, in savings, for your personal, you should have somewhere around about 6 months' wages, approximately, in savings. And for the business, anywhere between 3 and 6 months' worth of the running costs or fixed costs of your business. Some of the variable costs you can take out of this. So should there be a difficult time, you've got the money to see yourself through it without going bankrupt. And they're great savings goals: 6 months' wages, 3 to 6 months of fixed costs. And any more savings than that, and it's probably not a good idea, because that money, as I've said earlier, is depreciated in value. And plus, if you take money out of circulation by putting it in a bank, are you helping? Or if you don't put it in a bank and you take it and you put it somewhere else and you remove that money from circulation, what's that doing to the amount of money that's available? That money can't be doing any good if it's locked away somewhere. Now, when you give it to the bank invests it not on your behalf, on their behalf. So the more money you keep in the bank, the better the bank does, the worse you do. Bit weird, but that's just the truth of it. So once you've got more than an ideal amount in savings, what you should be looking at is longer term financial planning, stuff like stocks and shares, ISAs, pensions, etc. And you have to get proper advice on this. But to give you an idea, an ISA, which started in 1999, and you invested the max amount every year since 1999, which in 1999 the maximum you could put in was £7,000 a year. Right now it's £20,000 a year. And I don't think ISAs will be around forever, because they are quite, as you'll see in a second, quite lucrative. They're tax-free saving schemes, and they have performed pretty well. So if you put the maximum amount every year since 1999 into an ISA, and there was nothing to stop you from doing this, you would have invested a grand total of £306,100,000, a little bit over £306,100,000, and that would now be worth £898,000 now, just short of zero point 0.9 of a million. So it's an amazing opportunity, the ISA. If you just put that in the bank as savings, which is what a lot of people do, that money would now be, that 306k would now be 360k. So a massive difference between an ISA and just having savings. So I've been waffling on for a bit here now because I find this subject fascinating. And the problem being is that because this isn't taught anywhere and we don't really understand that our sort of attitude towards money has probably been passed on to us by friends, family, etc., and our behaviours are influenced by our knowledge and our attitude, then we're probably not in as good a place as we would be if we got ourselves financially literate. So the atomic action for this week is start your financial education today by learning more about money. And remember this, what's stopping most people is starting. And if you should, you must. If I've made you think a little bit about your financial literacy, then I've done my job. If you want to learn more, get in touch. And I'm thinking of doing a course on financial literacy, addressing all the things we talked about on this training topic. If you want to find out more, get in touch and I'll see if it's worth it. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.